Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to What's News. I'm Jay77, and there's a couple of stories I want to talk about, and I'm going to get right straight to it. But first, I want to make a little announcement in terms of my scheduling. A little changes, not much. As those who will soon find out that J&J Mondays are coming back for their third season, so a lot of things are going to get shifted. More likely to accommodate all the stuff that's happening. Um, I'm still deciding whether to put my what's news flashback reviews on a Saturday. Most likely it will, starting with knockoff, and just move everything down as in place. So that's the main change that's happening. That's also the reason why you didn't see anything last week. I'm kind of glad that it didn't happen because I get to talk about it in full detail this week about some of the stuff that's happened, especially within the last 72 hours. So we got a lot to talk about in terms of politics, and if you guys know, part not the whole, but part of the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, has been repealed through the House. It is on its way to the Senate, where the Senate doesn't seem too anxious to rush to get this going. And there's a lot of reasons why. And I'm going to be talking about it not as more as a criticism towards Republicans or the Democrats. I am going to give you my feeling towards the atmosphere of politics, period. But I want to do it in a way that it let us all think strongly, real look deep in our souls as to what we feel that is right, that is moral, that is justified by the not just by ourselves but by our government. Because this is a conversation that I don't think people really did do have, and this really gives us to butts heads a lot. Plus, what is too much power to a group of individuals versus too much power towards the people who believe they're right? There's that balance that we also need to talk about, as well as a reminder as why we have chosen our senators, our representatives, our presidents, our governors, our mayors, why we chose them, and what we expect of them as they was elected to high office. So those are the very important things I'm going to be talking about. I'm also going to be talking about a case from the Scientology files. Unfortunately, they're back in the news. I've seen the comment sections, and they're all screaming the same thing. I'll give you my own opinion. I'll talk about this Texas officer who fatally shot a teen and has been arrested and charged with murder. I'll talk about that. So there's a couple of stuff I want to get off and running to, and talk about it as well. But let's get right straight down to the Republicans who have voted for Trump Care, now they're calling it, already seeing their re-election chances fall or fall, suggest certain analyze. Now again, this is just analyzed. It's not fact. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 years, but there's a lot of pressure, especially for those who they know is going to be affected by this. They may actually retaliate by throwing them out of office. This is something that has been talked about even before doing the first attempt to repeal Obamacare has took place. But in this very short patches that I'm going to be talking about, the President Donald Trump hard-fought health care victory could backfire as the House Republicans that voted to repeal Obamacare are now viable for a backlash from their consultants. The Republicans have voted. This was a very narrow victory. I mean, there was a lot uh, uh, of possibility that this couldn't go through. No DMs have voted for this. It was even some Republicans, including some in my own state, have didn't wanted to go through with this. The vote was out of 400 and I believe 430 uh, 430 votes. 217 voted for it versus 213. The American Health Care Act hurts the re-election chances. Several representatives who support the bill, according to the Cook Political Report. And yet, I got to ask my question as I read this. All right, have said that according to the nonpartisan analysis, chances is that it's forecast in 20 House districts, deeming each of them more likely than before they be won by a Democrat. The analyzer also relabeled their three seats, leading Republicans to toss-ups. And yet, I got to ask the question: does it really? Does it really hurt them chances of them keeping their house? It could, but then again, there's a chance that it might not. And it really goes by what people's feelings are, what people's views are in terms of healthcare. I'm going to tell you something that when I was working in the fast food chain um, 20 years ago, it was a very, very long time ago. I was in my late teens, all the way to my all the way to my mid 20s. And I remember having a conversation with the person who was guarding um, the fast food chain because that was his job. It was there just to make sure nothing goes wrong, nothing shady goes on, to keep an eye on those who were going in and out because we had a lot of rowdy stuff going on and they did not want um, this to become a problem. So they had a security watching the store. And he was actually a former police officer who still does jobs for the NYPD for time to time in Staten Island. And I remember having this conversation with him about healthcare, and he said that I don't agree with healthcare, all people having healthcare. And I asked him that question why. He said it is not a constitutional right or a moral right to have health care. If you want health care, you need to go out and work for it. This was one of the feelings um, that he had, and he was very strong about it. I didn't ask him does he have health care and how much it costs for him to keep his health care, or is his work or is his job provider covers health care, and if so, how much? Because times have changed from when I asked him that question all the way to now. More and more people are paying more into their healthcare than ever before, and sometimes the healthcare isn't what they're actually paying for. It's actually getting a lot less for what they're putting in. There are people who are working long hours and not getting healthcare. These are people in the workforce. So there's not just one or the other. One or the other. It's very much one, does a job can afford a healthcare, which was a major issue that a lot of small businesses simply couldn't afford the coverage to give their workers. Small businesses like the guy who runs the pizzeria shop, to some of these mom and pop restaurants, to even the small businesses who does like warehouse work or stuff. The healthcare coverage was expensive, and those that were covered wasn't covered fully. For instance, the pre-existing existence, which I know I'm saying it wrong, pre-existing conditions. There we go. A little slowed down here. That was a big issue. I didn't know that became a big issue until a few years ago. That is a very big concern. Meaning, if you have a heart conditioning or you have asthma or anything else, they won't cover you based on that. And it's like, wait, what's the? You have healthcare coverage too. That way, yep, that way you can't afford the basic stuff that you need, and that's the biggest issue that I think that is happening here. Is that there's a whole lot of other stuff, a whole lot of layers, and simply saying the person who's getting covered ain't working hard for it, and that's the thing I notice a lot. A lot of people who are against it feels that they should not that America should not pay for someone who's not working, who's not trying to get a job, who's not trying to actually, lift themselves up. If they get a good job, if they work hard at it, they will be covered. That's not always the case. Even some of the great jobs who pay well are finding it that they don't do 100% full coverage. That you still have to pay out of your wallet. I've seen one person paying $115 of his own paycheck to get coverage that is not even 100%. So that's a very big issue here, and that's really what's really at stake here. And that is something that I think that both parties, Democrat and Republican, needs to seriously take a look at. Again, I don't understand, and I'm saying this right straight to the forward, why the Republicans were so hell bent to destroying this health care reform instead of just improving the stuff that needed to be done. It seemed like they had, and this is where I say they had no intention of trying to keep this health care. They don't want it, period. They just want it where it's open form, where these insurers can do whatever the hell they want, and they don't want to get involved in it. And that's the whole point. Now, is it just Republicans who feel this way? There are some Democrats too who feel the same way. Let's keep it real. There are a lot of them. But unlike the Democrats, these guys are just hell bent on just sticking it to Obama. They didn't like it to begin with. They didn't like him, and they're looking to reverse everything that he's done. And Trump has pretty much done a good job at going about face on stuff that Obama has done that have actually helped this country, not hurt it. And it's what leads me to my question about the party, but most importantly, it leads me to the question that I have to ask you, to those who are listening to this podcast. And I want you to think about it before you rush to judgment. Think about this. Think about your family. Think about your health. Think about how much it pays to attain this health. What type of health that you're really getting, and what it really covers. Because a lot of people have health care but don't know what type of health care, what kind of coverage that falls under their health care. Until something dramatic happens, God forbid, and they realize that their health care really don't cover that, or don't cover the full access of that, leaving you to fit the bill. 1. Do you think health care is a moral right? Yes, no, why? 2. Do you feel that healthcare in general should be enforced by the government? Yes, no, why? 3. Do you think healthcare would be better served as more of a business than anything else? Yes, no, why? 3. Do you think politicians should make an amendment that everybody should be covered? Yes, no, why? We need to answer these questions. We need to really ask ourselves, what should the government do, if they should do anything at all, and what we expect from them to do when that situation comes. Because again, the healthcare situation is simply not going away. They can repeal it all they want, but it's still going to be a problem that's going to be echoes for my generation, even after I'm long gone and in my grave. This is an issue that's going to constantly go down. And another thing is, we also got to keep in mind that there are other countries who's just as developed as we are who have health care. It may not be the perfect health care in the world. Let's be honest. I know I heard some stories about Canada and other places, but it's there. It's there for them to have. What was the benefit of them having that kind of health care plan, and what was the disadvantages? And should we actually look into it and improve it to implement it in our country? Yes, no, why? Also, is it really immoral that what the Republicans are doing? Is it really immoral that the Republicans want to eliminate the Affordable Care Act? Yes, no, why? Because I can tell you, a lot of people who are screaming and saying this is immoral, there's some people who feel the same way as the guy felt when I talked to nearly a decade and a half ago. That it's not a constitutional right for the government to give health care. And I think that's what the whole thing is. I think the Republicans feel it's not a constitutional right. It's not their place to force or give that kind of service to people. And the question is it really? If we believe, and I said this philosophically, if we believe that life is most precious to us and to everybody, shouldn't our health be just as precious as our life is? Because guess what? If we're in good health, that's good for us. If we're not in good health, that's not so good. If our children have pre-existing conditions that threaten their lives, what we want kind of some kind of healthcare plan that will help at least level the burden of cost that's going to be coming that may head their way. Gotta remember, hospital visits are not cheap. A doctor's visit just to talk to the man or woman can run anywhere from $150 to $200. Hospital stays within the thousands. Operations, pretty much your whole house is put up for mortgage. These are the main things that is at stake here. This is the main issue that's at stake. And here's the thing is about it that's also at stake, and this is why you're seeing a lot of lawsuits being going to be put in. New York as being one of them, if that actually comes to law. It hasn't come to law yet because the Senate hasn't actually rushed to try to get it passed because they're aware of the consequences. Something that the House representatives are not. They're aware of this. They're not going to rush into this. They said they're not rushing, and you know what? They don't need to rush. I actually think that's a good thing. Analyze it. Even Senator John McCain is saying, hey, we need to be careful what we're doing here. But there are people in the Republican Party who honestly feels it's not their moral responsibility or a constitutional responsibility to give people health care. And so they will use this as an anchor to cut services or butcher part of the healthcare plan, and along with other stuff they feel that is not within the federal government responsibility. Keep in mind the Republican Party do believe in small government and little federal intervention, which leads me to why I'm a little bit sore with the Republican Party in general. Not to the point where I hate the Republican Party. I don't. Honestly, I really don't. There are some good Republicans out there who I actually voted for, who I actually have done some good for my state. And has continued to do good for my state. So to sit there and say, oh, Republicans are this and that, no, that's not the case. But there are some radicals, extreme far-right Republicans who only see the world as one way and they don't see it as nothing else. And those are very scary people in office because they're uncompromisable. They don't believe in compromise. It's their way or the highway, and that never works. But this has been a blueprint that the Republicans have been following for years, and I honestly think that they need to reevaluate and realize time is changing and you need to change for the times. And you need to realize that although these guys who are running things and basically saying a lot of stuff, they are still stuck in a time frame that it no longer existed or had never existed to begin with. And if it did, it only exists for a certain select few. We don't need to know where I'm coming from. That you pretty much know in the 50s and 60s. You know exactly what I'm talking about. They feel that the government should be run as a business. Always had. From the late 1800s all the way to the 19th century, from the 19th century to the 20th century, they feel that business is the backbone of this country, and it is to a certain extent. To a certain extent, everything they have done is pro-business. To the point where it's actually become a detriment to the country. And it has been for a while. When you think too much in the business side, bad things sometimes happen. As we knew with the housing crisis. With our Great Depressions. We had more than one, keep in mind. The Great Depression of the 1920s wasn't the only one we went through. But that was the one that really people felt it hard. And the Republican Party need to understand. Okay, you want to make sure that business is here. You want to make sure business is booming. That is it is the cornerstone. But you must not make it the only thing. You cannot make it the only thing, and that's what bothers me. That is too much emphasis of catering to big businesses, which, by the way, some of them are greedy as hell. Who don't care about morals, who don't care about some of their workers and all the conditions that their workers are working in, and really are looking for any loophole they can possibly have to make more money. Say what you want about Hoover and his stance. The one thing Hoover had said, and he is so right about, and he's a Republican, by the way, who got wrongly ridiculed for the Great Depression. I don't think anyone was prepared for the Great Depression, not even the Democrats. The only difference between what Hoover was doing and what, you know, FDR was doing is FDR was trying to get us out of it. Where Hoover's mistake was he wanted business to get us out of it, and it wasn't working. People saw that as a person who didn't care for the American people, and that's why he got, basically tossed and basically been shamed out of the office undeservingly. Because I think if that wouldn't happen, I think he would have made a good president. Probably one of a great president. He had the potential to do it. Unfortunately, that depression hurt him. But again, his mistake, and it seemed to be the mistake of the Republican Party for quite some time, is that they constantly want big businesses to pick up the slack. They constantly repeat that. It's an ongoing thing, and it's also with Trump. Make no mistake about it, he is pro-business to death. To a fault, even. The Republican Party, I never forget this when they was walking out, especially with the person who lost to Obama doing his second term, Mitt Romney. I never forget what he said. He said, "Businesses are people." No, they're not. Business, corporations are people. No, they're not. And the fact that they actually will make that statement is ridiculous. Hearing the Republican official saying, "We just have to trust them to do the right thing." No, I don't. I don't trust them to do the right thing. This is the business. When you hear both Democrat and Republicans saying that when you run schools as a business, it's good for the children, it's good for the parents. No, it's not. There are certain things that as a business, but there's also certain things that are deemed that you cannot run as a business because bad things happen. And all you need to do is look at the incidents in charter schools where they was open only to mysteriously close down. There was no regulations. They was free to do whatever they want, unchecked, and there was a lot of problems, specifically in the Midwestern states. This was covered. It was documented. There are news about it. And who pays for it? The children, who was now out of misplaced and scrambling to get themselves back to school because just one day, 1 week, they're behind completely. But there are people out there who feel they should be running a business. And that's the problem. Not everything in the government should be run as a business. And shouldn't be run as a business. Another thing is there's this idealistic that socialism, which is actually implanted in our daily lives even before that became a synonym for bad things, is bad. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is public school is a social institution. Social services is not a bad thing. They're supposed to provide help and assistance for job training and even job placement. That's what it is. Not just going in there and collecting food stamps like everybody seems to always picture is, or getting a free check. No. They're supposed to provide you a service and assistance and information so you can move forward to that next step. Social Security. You're telling me that safety net for when you retire, that's what's supposed to be the way it was, is a bad thing? These are things that are needed. Keep in mind, in the 1900s all the way to the 1930s and 40s, there was no safety net. As a result of this, we had people who could not work anymore, pretty much starving, homeless. New York was ravaged with this. You're telling me that that's what you want to go back to? And that's the thing that I think the Republican parties have a problem with. They want to go back to a time where it was not always glamorous, where people of all race and cultures were actually suffering. And they believe by doing that is by catering more to the businesses and shrinking up services that they deem unfit, even though some of these services are desperately needed. Attacking systems that doesn't reply to their religious beliefs, even though they have services, good services, to those who actually need it. This is my issue with the Republican Party as it stands now. It is. This is my issue. So I spent 25 minutes here. I'm actually going to cut this into two parts, by the way. I'm going to finish the other story in two parts, so I'm not going to have this going on for an hour. But I felt the need to talk about this in this extent. And ask that question to everyone here about what their politicians should or shouldn't do, what policy that should be enforced, what policy that should go away, what we feel about ourselves, what we feel, how we value our lives, and how we value our health. Because it's not just me who's going to be affected or anybody else who's going to be affected. Keep in mind, the Republican Party is not going to be affected. These are billionaires, millionaires who, Obamacare doesn't apply to them. Affordable care doesn't apply to them. And that's the main problem here. You have too many guys in the party who are so rich that the laws they're passing or laws they want to repeal will not affect them one way or the other. It's us who's going to get affected. The working class, the middle class, the elderly, the poor, we're going to get affected by this, not them. They are not going to be affected by the laws that's going to be passed here. So they cannot fathom or understand or don't want to understand the situation that people go through every single day with their health care coverage, with struggling to get the service they need. They're not going to get affected by it. It's also the same philosophy when you have a lot of Republicans who are running and Democrats who existed back at this time. They were rich. They're not going to get affected. Grover Cleveland was a Democrat who had to deal with the Great Depression himself in his time. He didn't do a damn thing. He didn't see that that was their responsibility. But he also didn't see the fact that there were people who were actually starving. And he also didn't see the fact that there were people who didn't have a safety net in the services. He just says, I don't think it's the government responsibility to provide service of any kind. Well, things didn't get any better. He got elected. He got kicked out in his second term. He was the only one that ran for non-consecutive terms, and his second term was a nightmare. People didn't see him out of touch, and they were right. Hoover, again, he got blamed for something that came and hit him square in the face. His failure was not really more with the Great Depression, but more the fact is he gave little help. He expected the corporations at that time to pick up the slab, and it simply wasn't happening. This is why when people said back in that time, and even though the government needs to do more, they need to act more. Our philosophy is, if you give corporations all this money and all these tax breaks, that will help the country. Well, not really. Keeping it real, not really. But again, this is something that I think that we all need to sort of really sit down and talk and really think about, especially when we elect our officials. Sometimes we elect our officials for the wrong reasons. Sometimes we had all with their glitter and fame sometimes that we don't realize that maybe that's not a good trait to have running for office. Now, again, I'm not knocking Trump on this one. I'm saying it to every politician. Because they know how to command the voice, know how to get people riled up. But at the same time, when you ask people why they vote for them, you don't really get a very full answer that they actually knew what they was voting for. Bill Maher has said it best. He asked those liberals who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton because they were mad at Hillary Clinton, do they still regret not voting for Hillary Clinton? And a good portion of them now regret it. More so than the people who actually voted for Donald Trump. Now, I can respect that. Because, yeah, Trump is bad and Trump is not doing what I expect him to do, but no, you know what, I still vote for him. So obviously there's something he's doing right. Don't see it, but I can respect it. Where I don't respect a person who sat at home and didn't vote. complained that Hillary Clinton is this and that, and now they're wondering why this stuff is happening. This stuff is happening because you didn't vote. You didn't get up. We'll see now, because it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to go down. Again, this was not a major blowout victory. And you're going to see a lot more in this meets the eye. This is not over. This is going to be a war. The Affordable Care Act is going to continue on for years. Loss is going to happen. And the question, is it really moral for them to do what they're doing? Should it be moral? Is it really, the government does have a moral responsibility to provide people with health care? And I think before anybody gets mad or enraged, I think you need to answer that. I think everybody needs to answer that. And really ask her, why are we putting any kind of politician in office, and what is the reason, what we're looking for them to do? Until then, this is going to continue to be like this. In terms of our politics, we're divided more than ever. We need to really assess why we voted for these guys, but most importantly, what we see in ourselves. There's a bubble out there, guys, that is so small it's painful. And we need to start stepping up and start really educating ourselves more on our politics, as well as just in general how things work in Congress. But that's my opinion. I'd like to hear yours. Part 2 will be coming up at a later date. Again, I don't want to make this into an hour-long video, but part 2 will be on its way. Until next time, J77 saying take care, be safe. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.